Endeavors involving jazz, we're usually extremely on time and just very crisp with. I personally am one who's always on. No. Welcome to the campus of Rutgers University-Newark, an anchor institution to this great city and home to the Institute of Jazz Studies, the foremost archive and research facility dedicated to jazz in the world. Today, we are thrilled to announce that the Institute for Jazz Studies is the new home to the complete Count Basie Collection. Y'all can clap a long time for that. That's something. Comprised of over 1,000 items, the collection features a diverse mix of archival material, including photographs, videos, correspondence, concert programs, business records, clippings, as well as additional personal memorabilia such as clothes, accessories, scrapbooks, commercially issued recordings, coin and stamp collections, housewares, guns, stereo equipment, cameras, and awards, all of which will be of great use and interest to scholars, musicians, music fans, and the general public, and very useful for exhibitions dedicated to the life and career of this global music icon. Although the materials cover the entirety of Basie's lifetime, the collection represents the latter years of Basie's life and career particularly well, including a large number of accolades, his Grammy Awards, honorary degrees, and proclamations. It's important to note here that there are several boxes of materials relating to the life and work of Catherine Basie, who was herself a very charismatic and interesting person. She was Basie's wife and life partner for over 40 years and was very involved in her community with young people in the neighborhood and in the civil rights movement. She will no doubt be the subject of historical examination. We are extremely excited, grateful, and humbled to have been chosen to be stewards of the Basie legacy in the form of this collection, as well as with the name, likeness, and trademark ownership. We're also happy to have a New Jersey native come home, where his life and legacy can be celebrated locally, and shared globally. Now, as with any endeavor, there are many people to thank, and I must start with my chancellor, the great Nancy Cantor, without whom this definitely would not have happened, and almost didn't. I must also extend a thank you to Rutgers President Robert Barchi, as well as Mike Gower and his team in the Treasurer's Office, Michael Rambert, our General Counsel, and especially my colleague and friend Arcilio Aponte, who is the greatest CFO I've ever had the pleasure of working with. There are a lot of others whom I must acknowledge, and I will do so after our guest speakers have said a few words. But I do have to tell you, I have the pleasure of working every day with a team of scholars, librarians, archivists, and jazz heads, all rolled up into the best colleagues one could ever hope to have. Would the staff of the Institute of Jazz Studies stand up and be acknowledged for a second, please? We have several corporate sponsors this afternoon that I want to thank up front, and those include Lisa Marcus and Riviera Imports and Kind of Blue Scotch, which you're going to be sampling later during the reception. Brian Ord of Wilmington Trust, who's a friend and hopefully ongoing partner, and Preston Pinkett of City National Bank. We should give them a hand for sponsoring today's. Joy Rosenthal, who is possibly the perfect person to have been chosen to be trustee of the Basie estate, and from whom you'll hear shortly, reached out to a young man who is himself such a respected lawyer, advisor, entrepreneur, music and entertainment expert that no less than the estates of Miles Davis, Norman Whitfield, Don Cornelius, and many others have sought his guidance. She reached out to him to help her find a new home for the Basie estate. Darryl Porter is an extraordinary human being, has been instrumental to this process. We should acknowledge Darryl. Darryl, would you stand up for a second? Where is he? Now, it was just over a year ago just about a year ago that Daryl was, as he does, having a conversation with Branford Marsalis. And in describing to him this latest assignment that he talked about that he was on the search for a home for the Basie estate. And Branford stopped him short and said, no, you don't need to search. It needs to be at Rutgers. It needs to be at the Institute of Jazz Studies. And you need to call Wayne Winborn. This is absolutely true. And Branford called me to get permission, which was a little weird to me because I thought, is this a trick question? Yeah, you can give her my number. And that started our conversation. And I say that because it wasn't just because Branford knew me, he did, but he knew about the Institute of Jazz Studies. And I know that Daryl did his homework on this great organization and its reputation and what it has done for over 6 decades. And a large part of that work as great stewards of this great art and the musicians who have made it is due to my predecessor, who is a giant in the world of jazz and someone whom has been a great advisor and I dare say friend to me and could not have been more gracious to someone coming to take his place. And that person is Dan Morgenstern. Dan's gonna come up and say a few words because if I'm not mistaken, he might be one of the only people in the room who actually knew Basie. So Dan, would you come and say a few words, please?
It's still good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be back in the fair city of Newark, and I feel honored to have been asked to say a few words. Now, Count Basie, who actually was Bill Basie to his friends and to musicians, you know how he came to be an aristocrat, right? Do you know? He had a band in Kansas City. It was really his first band called the Barons of Rhythm. And a radio announcer who was pretty hip introduced the band, the Barons of Rhythm, led by Count Basie. That's how he became the Count. Anyway, Bill Basie was a master of musical economy. His piano playing, there was never a wasted note, and the same goes for the band. And he was also a man of few words. So he was not the easiest to interview. I never had to interview him, so it's okay. I had a few encounters. I was lucky to have a few encounters with Mr. Basie. And by the way, acquiring this unbelievable collection is a wonderful thing for the Institute, and I congratulate people who were involved in achieving that. It is a major. The first time I got to see Basie live was not long after my arrival in the USA, and in those days, in the late 40s, they still had shows at the first-run movie theaters in the Times Square area, and there was one. I think it was a theater called the Palace. And these shows were great. The first one was pretty early in the day, and you could get in if it was the earliest one, you get in for 35 cents. Of course, 35 cents in 1947 was a lot more now. Subway was a nickel, you know how it was. You don't know how it was. But anyway, that show was a memorable one because it was also the first time I saw Billie Holiday. And at that time, Basie had pared down to a small group. He had a sextet, and Clark Terry was in it. That's the first time I saw Clark. And it was wonderful to see the legendary Mr. Basie there live. Billie Holiday was on the program too. And an extra added attraction in smaller letters was Sammy Davis with the Will Maston Trio. So that was quite a show. Anyway, the first time I got to really see Count Basie in action was when I was privileged, this is many years later, to be at a recording session with the band. And there I noted something that I already had suspected, that in addition to the economy that he applied to his piano playing, he was also a great editor. So these were all new arrangements that the band was being faced with for the first time. And after they run through something, Basie would say in his quiet way, I don't think we need this part, and I don't really think we need that. So he was a great editor and had a marvelous sense of how to utilize space and time. And it was the same with words. He was very concise and very direct. I had the great pleasure, there was a concert at Town Hall, and it was one of those things that was a mixture of a wide range of people. There was Roy Eldridge, who at the time had a small group with Richard Kimuka on tenor. There was John Coltrane, and there was Basie. And I went backstage to say hello to Roy, who was a dear friend, and there was the Count. And he was in a good mood, and so he said to a small group of us, to Roy and somebody else, and I think I was with a pretty girl, so that was probably helpful. Anyway, he said, why don't we go uptown, go to my place. There was Count Basie's in Harlem, which then was pretty new. And so we went up in a taxi cab, and that was the time where it was sort of intimate, and Basie was, talking about how the club got started and so on. And it was really great to get that kind of a fairly intimate glimpse of him. And when we arrived at the club, of course, everybody was delighted to see him. And then, of course, people came up to him, and he practically did not have a moment to himself. So he was a wonderful person with absolutely no side. I mean, he was a regular guy, and in spite of his great acclaim, he was just a really warm and friendly person. And of course, his music has that wonderful, happy quality, and it was such a revelation when he came out of Kansas City with his band, and nobody had ever heard anything like that before. That riff-based Kansas City thing. It was a revelation, and it really changed. It changed the music, and it was a permanent change, because you'd never have had bebop without what Count Basie did with Lester Young and Joe Jones and all that. So it is a wonderful thing that the Institute of Jazz Studies has acquired this collection, which is really it represents all of Mr. Basie, from lots of items of clothing to music to souvenirs to it's the whole life there, and I congratulate the Institute and the people who were responsible for this. And I think Count Basie, or Bill Basie as he was to friends, would be very happy to see that his legacy is now housed in his home state of New Jersey. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. A conversation with Dan is always a conversation with, and it's a living legacy. He's a blessing to us. Thanks again. And now I'd like to invite Joy Rosenthal, who is trustee to the Basie estate, to say a few words and on their behalf and on the behalf of Diane Basie.
Good morning. First, I want to thank IJS and Wayne and the sponsors for this event. On Christmas Eve 2012, this is a true story, I got a phone call, I checked my caller ID, and it said the Court of the State of New York, and Judge Kristen Booth Glenn was on the phone, and she said, "Joy, what are you doing at 11 o'clock on Wednesday?" I said, "Well, I'll be around." She said, I've got a project for you. I want you to be the trustee of the William J. Basie Trust, the guardian for his disabled daughter, Diane, and the co-trustee of the Catherine Basie Trust. Are you up for it? And my qualifications, by the way, were that I knew something about trust and estates law, and I love jazz. That's it. You don't say no when a judge calls you, and you don't say no when an opportunity like this falls into your lap. So of course I said yes right away, and I had absolutely no idea what I was getting into. The first thing I did was go home and tell my husband, Daryl Allardyce, who's here. He's my right and left hand. And he said, "You're absolutely crazy. Do you have any idea what you're getting yourself into?" And I said, "No." But he's listened to my endless stories about it and been a great sport about it ever since. The next thing I did was tell my right and left hand at work, Andy Bemke, who's also here. And he said, "You're absolutely crazy. Do you have any idea what you're getting yourself into?" And I said, "No, but it'll be an adventure." And he has worked side by side with me through this whole thing, also for the last 5.5 years, and he's been an instrumental part of preparing everything so that it was in a shape to be sold, to transfer. The Basies raised Diane at Adsley Park in St. Albans, Queens, a beautiful neighborhood whose residents also included John Coltrane, Ella Fitzgerald, Jackie Robinson, Lena Horne, Roy Campanella, Joe Lewis, and James Brown. Pamela Jackson, whose mother was best friends with Mrs. Basie and who's also here today, grew up across the street, and she flew in all the way from Houston to be here. Maxine Gordon, who is also here today and has just come back from Europe to be here, gave me a tour of the neighborhood based on research that she did to get that neighborhood made landmark status. One of the most incredible perks of this job has been going to hear the Count Basie Orchestra, which is still very active. They just finished a 2-week tour and a recording session in Los Angeles. They had a sold-out crowd of 15,000 at the Playboy Jazz Festival Sunday night. As Dan told you, Count Basie ran the band for 50 years, and it's still going strong now, 35 years after his death. This is due in large part to the indomitable spirit, dedication, and hard work of Dee Askew, and its director, Scotty Barnhart, and its really incredible roster of top-notch musicians consistently through the years that keep it swinging and really tight. I've worked with Adam Phillipson, who's here, who runs the Count Basie Center for the Arts, a major institution in Red Bank, Count Basie's hometown. He has been instrumental in keeping Basie's name front and center there, which is not an easy thing to do at a time when art centers tend to be named for donors and not for artists. One of the things that we had to do was to find out what we had. Layla Dunbar, Andy, and I spent many days in a cold Newark warehouse that was over the tracks behind the graveyard, climbing over crates and making a careful inventory and photographing every item in the collection. The Basies themselves did a fantastic job of preserving things, even when they lived in the Bahamas, which was, as we all know, is very damp. Most of the stuff was in excellent shape, considering its age. We found all kinds of awards and accolades, from dance competitions in the 30s that you see one of the awards out there, to the Kennedy Center Award and several Grammy Awards. Keys to just about every city in the world, and at programs and press articles from around the world. And a lot of fan material. We found telegrams and cards from all kinds of celebrities and important figures, including a telegram from Oscar Peterson sent on Basie's 75th birthday that said, "Dear Bass, you really didn't need all these people to tell you what I could have told you a long time ago. I love you." Several telegrams were sent to Basie in the hospital when he was recuperating from a heart attack. Frank Sinatra said, "Hey man, that ain't no way to act. I love you. Francis Albert, your boy singer." Sammy Davis wrote, "Get out of there, Red Bank, because we love you. Love, Sammy." Billy Eckstein wrote, "Count Bill Basie, what are you trying to do? Stop. Don't you know we have a gig on July 5th? Stop. Hurry up and get well. Stop. Love you." There were love letters to Catherine and Diane, as well as home movies and photos of their grand and elegant parties that they had around their Olympic-sized swimming pool on the double lot they had in Adderley Park. There was a menu from the club that Dan just mentioned, Count Basie's in Harlem, where the drinks were 65 cents and a chopped steak a la Basie was $1.50. One of the real gems was a composition notebook from a 1939 tour listing where they played, each date, and the personnel for each gig, including Basie, Page, Lester, Jack, Earl, Buddy, Dickie, and all their expenses, phones, baggage, tips, train fare, union, salaries, etc. The artifacts also tell the story of Mrs. Basie, who was home with Diane while he was on the road. But she was not just sitting at home. She was a socialite and quite active in civic and civil rights organizations in the community and around the country, particularly the Urban League, the NAACP, and the National Conference of Christians and Jews. She and some other celebrity wives, including Mona Hinton, Milt Hinton's wife, who was a dear friend and neighbor, had a group called the Rinky Dinks, for which they raised funds for various causes. Telegrams that we found from Martin Luther King Jr., from Coretta, saying, "I'd like to invite you to lunch with my husband and me." Jesse Jackson and John Lindsay were addressed to her, to Mrs. Basie. And then, of course, there's the music. Ben Young and John Riggle helped us catalog and preserve the sound recordings and sheet music we found. Of course, our legal team, led by Bob Donnelly, who's here, Paul Bazilla and Tom Siaka, provided sound counsel along the way, and we look forward to working with David Baxenbaum, who's also here. We knew that those crates were hiding stories of historical significance, so we asked Daryl Porter and Kim Porter-Flewellen to help get the word out, which they did. I want to take a moment to thank their father, Al Porter, who had the good sense to raise his kids with integrity, warmth, and intelligence, and for flying in from Chicago to be with us. Daryl and Kim arranged first for a 6-month exhibit at the Grammy Museum in Los Angeles, and there's still some items on display there at the Grammy Museum in Mississippi, and you should take a look at the Grammy Experience at the Prudential Center here in Newark. They also arranged for a wonderful documentary to get made by folks at Eagle Rock, which will be out next year. Look for it on American Masters. But the main thing that Daryl and Kim did was to find IJS, Basie's new home base. They did an amazing job, not just of finding a place that could receive these assets, but the very best place. This acquisition will keep the collection together, they'll catalog it, they will preserve it in perpetuity, make it available to researchers, partner with museums and other universities to shine light on Basie's important place in American music. And to have all of this take place at the State University of New Jersey, where Basie was from, is an added bonus. It just comes full circle. Even more brilliantly, they arranged for IJS not just to acquire Count Basie's name and likeness, not just the materials, but Basie's name and likeness, which means that this institution, whose very mission is to collect, preserve, and make jazz heritage accessible, will control Count Basie's image, his brand in modern terms, so that generations to come will know who Count Basie was and why he was important. The Basie stories are uniquely American. The story of one of the greatest, most well-respected and well-loved band leaders, of Basie's place in the history of American music, of a couple who was separated by years on the road, of a life with a daughter who was born in the 40s who had cerebral palsy and never spent one day in an institution, of Black aristocracy, of their place in the civil rights movement and in the consciousness of others. These stories lie in the collection, and they need to be told. I want to thank everyone I've mentioned and others I haven't who have helped along the way. I want to thank all of you for coming out, but most of all, I thank Wayne Winborn and his colleagues here at IJS and at Rutgers for recognizing Count Basie's significance and for making the commitment to preserve this wonderful asset and for welcoming the Basies to their spiritual and physical home once again. I cannot wait to hear and read the stories that come out of this collection. Count Basie's genius was in brevity and timing. It's now after 11:30 on Wednesday morning, and I've been talking too long, so I will take the cue and get off the podium. Thank you so much.
Our Chancellor, Nancy Cantor, has spread the gospel of Rutgers University-Newark being an anchor institution. We are in and of Newark. And what that means for us, one of the things it means is that we're deeply connected to community, much like this music itself, rooted in the experience of a people who found a way to express themselves in the face of incredible inhumanity. It also means that we have some wonderful partners right here on the ground. And the next three speakers represent this great city and the partners with whom we work. Amy Niles is president and CEO of WBGO. Our planet's foremost purveyor of jazz on radio and online. And after that, John Schreiber, the inimitable John Schreiber, our partner, our friend who runs the New Jersey Performing Arts Center. A world-class presenter of great art in all of its forms, but with a deep commitment to jazz right here in Newark, will come up. And following that, the mayor and leader of this great city, Mayor Ras Baraka. So, Amy.
Greetings, everyone. Now, there's something that we say each and every day on WBGO. We say we're broadcasting from the jazz capital of the world. Well, I have to say, welcome to Newark, the jazz capital of the world, right? We play Count Basie. I think there's hardly a day that we don't play Count Basie on WBGO. But this collection is certainly a jewel in the crown of the extraordinary riches that we have here in Newark. The Institute of Jazz Studies NJPAC, all the extraordinary galleries that we have. You'll always hear jazz in the background when you visit the arts here in Newark. I want to take a moment just to acknowledge a great citizen who was born in Newark who passed away this week. Lorraine Gordon from the Village Vanguard passed away this week. A great supporter of this city and the arts. Maybe you weren't aware of her because she did it kind of quietly. But the Basie Band and Count Basie were always a great influence on Lorraine. In fact, quite a number of the Vanguard Jazz Orchestra members had been members of the Basie Band. And so do want to acknowledge Lorraine. I also want to say that it's the responsibility of each and every person in this room to carry on this torch of this music, to make sure that all of these extraordinary items and all of this music, the items that have been donated and will be on display at the Institute, that we all take the responsibility to carry this torch and make sure that these items are living and breathing, and the legacy of Count Basie is there and available for each and every one of us for generations to come. And thank you all for coming and doing this. Thank you.
I get to go on before the mayor, of course, which is just perfect timing, Wait till you hear him. So I'm really delighted to be here, and congratulations to Wayne, and especially to Nancy, who, when she got here some years ago, made a commitment to jazz and to the Institute, and that commitment enabled us to locate this man as the new leader after Dan's amazing 40 years, 35 years as head of the Institute. So the Institute is in a good place, and now with this collection, it's going to be in an even more extraordinary place. The Arts Center believes in jazz very, very deeply. We are the most consistent presenter of jazz in the state with the James Moody Jazz Festival that we do every year, with our jazz education programs that are so important to our young people. And now, with the Basie Collection, we are committing to regular programming over the course of each season that celebrates Basie's legacy. And that's a legacy, as has been said before, of brilliant musicianship, of joy, and of what we call the democracy of jazz. That is collaboration and community. We're going to be having a Basie concert with the band and special guests as part of the Moody Festival in November. And working with Wayne, we're going to be developing education programs and other programming over the course of this season and future seasons. We're master planning 7 acres of land around the Arts Center, and the hope is part of that master plan will include a jazz center that will partner with IJS and hopefully with Amy at WBGO and others, so that this truly becomes even more of a locus for jazz. I'm really glad that Adam Phillipson is here from the Basie Center for the Performing Arts. Yep. And the education work that the Basie is doing is really grade A, and we look forward here in Newark to collaborating with all of you in Red Bank so that 1 and 1 equals 3, right? I'll say a personal thing. When some of you know I had a past, right? Before I got this job, I spent the first 20 years of my life working for a guy named George Wein. And when I was a kid, very early in my career, we got to go to Europe and Asia every summer and fall with all sorts of different jazz musicians. So what would happen is in the summer, George would say, you know, Sarah's going out, and Muddy Waters is going out, and B.B. King is going out, and Buddy Rich is going out, and Bass is going out, and we would divide up the bands, and we would get to road manage different, Dexter's going out, you know, whoever, right? And we would divide up the bands, and if you were lucky, you got a really great assignment. Like, nobody wanted Buddy Rich, you know, what can I tell you, you know? But I was lucky because I got Basie twice. And I got to go on the road with Basie and that band. And it was the most together operation of almost any organization in jazz. And Basie was this, as has been said, was this really gentle, kind, twinkle in his eye, you know, brilliant guy. He never said much, but man, that band was on time. You know, when you were Basie's road manager, you were basically along for the ride. You didn't have to do anything. All you had to do was just make sure that the promoter paid you each night. The Basie band essentially took care of itself. So I was lucky. I got to work with that band, know some of those musicians. And that spirit is present in this collection, and we're so excited that it's here, and we're really excited that it's going to be shared with not only Newarkers, but with the world. So Godspeed to all of us. Mayor.
I just have to say just a couple of sentences about our mayor. I'm not one who's prone to hyperbole, and I'm not. I'm an old jazz head. I hate everything, and as musician friends of mine will know, I try to do it in a nice way, but I typically will say to someone, man, that was not happening, or why did you hire that drummer? But I am a fan of this gentleman. I don't think he knows it very, very well, but I am a big fan of his. He is an artist. He's an educator. And as far as I can tell, he's the only artist and educator who's been elected to lead a major city in this country. And he is doing so. And he is doing so with an integrity and a commitment and a genius, I would say, that really is going to be a model going forward, I truly believe. He is deeply connected to the people of this city, some of whom I think didn't vote for him last time. He is deeply connected to newcomers to this city like myself, who have the benefit of growing along with this city. And he is deeply connected to the arts and the business community. And what he's doing is nothing short of exceptional. If you walk around downtown Newark, you'll see it. And you should know that there is a commitment on the folks who are there to making sure that the progress that you all see also extends to people in communities that typically are left out. I cannot say enough about him. It's an honor to be in this city. I think it's great that Count Basie is back in New Jersey and is going to be near someone who understands that legacy and is extending it. And ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Honorable Mayor Ras Baraka.
Thank you. Thank you for those kind words. I appreciate it. I'm going to take you with me on the road. First of all, I just want to thank the Chancellor Cantor. I don't think that, matter of fact, I'm 100% positive that none of this could be possible without her presence. And that a lot of folks don't see that, because we're on the ground making things happen. I know that you have to go to bat to a few people in a few spaces that may not understand what this really means today, to be able to go in those circles and talk to those people and make them understand that this is something that's serious, real, for not just the city of Newark, for the state, the region, this country. To have it here in Newark is phenomenal, incredible. As a matter of fact, this room should probably be packed with reporters and writers from all likes, but there's nobody dying in here today. So, it becomes not that important, but this is probably one of the most important stories that the city is a part of in 2018. It is an honor to be here today, and I want to thank Wayne for making sure that this also took place, and the folks that, that made this the institute, that made this happen today, the Thought It Not Robbery to land the Count Basie's collection, his history here in the city of Newark. we are so excited. Last year we got the Grammy Museum. This year we get the Count Basie Collection. Is doing a phenomenal and incredible job here. Newark has been rated one of the top 10 cities, burgeoning cities for art and culture in this nation. That has a lot to do with not just the big players like the PAC or BGO or the museum, but also a lot of these young and long-standing arts kind of places that exist in our city, from galleries to music venues, all these things that are growing and continue to grow, that are going to benefit from this being here. And the thousands of young people that have an opportunity to learn and listen and hear and touch and see the great Count Basie. I had the pleasure of growing up listening to Duke Ellington, Sun Ra, Sun Ra, in my house, Thelonious Monk, Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald, I had the opportunity to listen to that and be at parties where that was being played live, with from bands local, near, or far, and Count Basie, whether it was April in Paris or The Night in Tunisia or She's Funny That Way, or I had the opportunity to compare Count Basie playing Autumn Leaves or Nat King Cole singing Autumn Leaves, right? So I grew up in an atmosphere where those things were second nature to me, to be able to listen to and hear and appreciate that, and it had an impact on my life. And I think that it is completely selfish and unfair not to share this incredible, incredible opportunity to thousands and thousands of other Americans, because I learned at 14 years old that jazz was America's classical music. And we didn't have to go very far to listen to classical music. You didn't have to grab all of the folks. In Europe, you could go right here in Newark to a club, or New York to a club, and hear a great jazz band, and listen to some serious classical music. So I understand that, and I understand that American history is, jazz, and jazz is American history. And it is absolutely appropriate for it to be at Rutgers University-Newark, incredibly appropriate to be at the Institute of Jazz Studies, and more than wonderful to have a brother like Wayne orchestrating it here in the city of Newark at this time in the present moment of history as we move our city forward. God bless you, and God bless Count Basie.
See, Newark Mayor swings. He swings. It was swinging. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all very, very much for coming out today. I want to thank again our sponsors for this event: Wilmington Trust, City National Bank, Riviera Imports. We have a number of things. We're not done. We're done with this portion, but we're not done for the day. We will have videos playing of Count Basie concerts. I think we're going to have it on the big screen here. We have a beautiful reception set up for you in Clement's Place, our jazz club that's named after our beloved colleague, Clement Alexander Price. We do have the little mini exhibit for you to sample now. That's just a taste of what's going to come in the not too distant future. We've got some work to do. Our staff are going to be cataloging and processing and doing all of that background work so that when you walk into a beautiful space in this city and see the exhibit, you will be wowed. We need your support. We need your love. We need you to spread the word. We need your checks if you're so inclined. That's important too, but if not, we need you to spread the word about what we're doing here in the city and at the Institute of Jazz Studies and at Rutgers, and we need you to continue to support this music and this art form. I know I've left some people out. I apologize if I have. We'll try to clean that up in the post-conference, but we are thrilled and excited, and we couldn't be more grateful for the help that all of you have given us in acquiring this wonderful collection and really being great stewards, which we will be, of this incredible icon, his wife, his legacy, and his music. So thank you all. Have a great afternoon. Go into Clements. We're going to be moving the party there. Thank you all very much.